If you broke your femur the way a hunter-gatherer's bone broke 20,000 years ago, a modern doctor would assume you fell off a building. Your skeleton is thinner and weaker than theirs, and it has been getting weaker for thousands of years, long before anyone invented a chair. This isn't about size. Ancient humans weren't giants, and many were shorter than you. But if you cut open one of their leg bones and compare it to yours, you'd find something strange. Theirs is dense almost all the way through, while yours has a thin shell wrapped around something closer to foam. The answer starts with a bone scientist named Habiba Churcher. In 2015, she and her colleague Timothy Ryan ran CT scans on hundreds of skeletons, not just modern humans but chimpanzees, early Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and bones going back millions of years. They were looking at something called trabecular bone. That's the spongy lattice-like bone hidden inside the ends of your femur and your hip, the scaffolding underneath the hard outer shell. In every ancient skeleton they scanned, that internal scaffolding was thick and dense. In modern humans it was different. Lighter, sparser, almost porous, like the bone had given up on holding weight. The drop wasn't gradual either. It had a starting point. Churcher and Ryan traced the decline to roughly 12,000 years ago. That's the same window when humans started farming instead of foraging. Before that, every human on Earth was an athlete by necessity, walking for miles to track animals, climbing for food, carrying water, children, firewood, and kills. Your bones don't know the difference between exercise and survival. They only know force, and for hundreds of thousands of years, force was constant. Bone is alive, people forget that. It's not a fixed structure like a steel beam. It is rebuilt continuously by cells that respond directly to the stress placed on it. Engineers call this mechanical loading. Put real strain on a bone and it thickens itself in response, laying down new mineral exactly where the pressure hits hardest. Stop straining it, and the bone reads that as a signal to start removing material it no longer thinks it needs. This is the same reason astronauts lose bone density in space. Zero gravity means zero load, their skeletons dissolving themselves within weeks because there's no stress telling the bone it's still needed. Most of us are living a slower, gentler version of that same signal. Not weightlessness, just chairs, cars, elevators, and sidewalks instead of riverbeds and game trails. A second researcher backs this up from a completely different angle. Christopher Ruff, a biomechanics specialist at Johns Hopkins. He spent decades studying something called cross-sectional geometry. That's just a way of measuring how thick and how round a bone's shaft is when you slice straight through it, the same way you judge how strong a pipe is by its wall thickness rather than just its length. Ruff compared the leg bones of foraging populations to early farming populations across multiple continents, and the pattern repeated itself almost everywhere he looked. Hunter-gatherers had thick-walled, oval-shaped shafts built to resist twisting and bending from constant uneven terrain. Early farmers doing repetitive, less varied movement had thinner, rounder shafts, less reinforcement, less demand. A third line of evidence comes from one of the most famous fossil sites on Earth, Sterkfontein in South Africa, part of what's now called the cradle of humankind. Researchers studying remains from that region alongside comparable East African sites found that even our much older ancestors, going back well over 1 million years, showed the same dense internal bone structure seen in recent hunter-gatherers. The pattern isn't unique to one tribe or one era. It runs through almost the entire length of human evolution. It only breaks in the last few thousand years, the blink of an eye, geologically speaking. So picture it like a museum diagram, a real morning 60,000 years ago somewhere in what is now southern Africa. A woman is walking before sunrise, maybe 25 years old. She isn't jogging for cardio. She's tracking. Her feet read the ground like braille, adjusting instantly to rock. Her hips absorb shock with every uneven step. By midday she might be digging for tubers, crouched low, driving a sharpened stick into hard-packed earth with her shoulder and forearm. By afternoon she's carrying something heavy back to camp balanced against her hip, her spine and pelvis compensating with every stride. None of this is exercise to her, it's just Tuesday. But her skeleton is recording every single ounce of it, laying down bone exactly where the stress demands it. Now here's the twist, and it's the part that surprises most people. Strength wasn't really the goal of evolution here at all, survival was. The dense bone wasn't built so she could be strong. A thinner bone under that kind of unpredictable, multi-directional force across uneven ground with a heavy load for decades would eventually crack. Evolution wasn't rewarding strength for its own sake. It was punishing fragility with brutal consistency. The humans who survived were the ones whose bones could absorb chaos without breaking. Which means the density we lost wasn't really a side effect of comfort. It was a side effect of safety, of smooth floors and predictable terrain, of motion that no longer demands variation. We removed the chaos, and our bones quietly took us at our word. Here's where it lands on you directly. You almost certainly walk on flat, even surfaces nearly all day, concrete pavement. Your joints rarely have to improvise. Your skeleton has no reason to reinforce itself against uneven, unpredictable force because it almost never encounters any. Astronauts get bone loss from zero gravity. You're getting a milder version from zero variability. Different cause, disturbingly similar outcome. It also explains something doctors constantly see and rarely connect to deep history. How common fractures from minor falls have become with age, even in people who consider themselves healthy. It isn't only about getting older. It's about generations of skeletons built under far less demand than the ones that came before them. None of this requires you to start hunting antelope across the savanna. The signal that builds bone is specific: load. Walking on uneven ground instead of only flat pavement, carrying occasionally instead of letting machines do it, and resistance training, the kind that briefly stresses bone the way climbing or digging once did by necessity. Your skeleton isn't asking for the past. It's asking for variety and for force. It needs the same input it has needed since long before agriculture, long before cities, long before this video found you scrolling on a flat screen instead of walking across uneven ground. If you broke your femur the way your ancestors broke theirs, the way they fell from a tree or wrestled an animal that fought back, your bone would have absorbed it. The story now is quieter and stranger. The break doesn't come from falling further. It comes from asking less.